Welcome to The Weekend. I'm Eugene Daniels, along with Jonathan Capehart and Anthony Coley, who's in this morning for Jackie Alemany. Congress returns from their Memorial Day recess this week. There's plenty of unfinished business. As MS Now reports, Senate Republicans are preparing for a showdown over President Trump's $1.776 billion so-called anti-weaponization fund, which is part of a roughly $70 billion immigration enforcement reconciliation package. Very confusing. It's unclear how GOP leadership plans to navigate the dissent over the fund within their own party, after previous concerns that some Republicans would support Democratic amendments blocking the proposal, effectively gutting the fund. Trump, of course, is likely not happy about all of this, especially since he gave a self-imposed June 1st deadline, that's tomorrow, for the GOP to pass the reconciliation package. House Speaker Mike Johnson probably won't be thrilled either, and he's got his own hands full. The House will revisit a war powers resolution aimed at reining in President Trump's military operations in Iran, which was previously scrapped after GOP leaders concluded they didn't have enough votes to defeat it. It's expected to pass with a handful of Republican defectors, though. Joining us now at the table, Michael Schnell, MS Now congressional reporter, and Scott MacFarlane, chief Washington correspondent at Midas Touch and host of Scott MacFarlane Reports. Thank you both for joining us so much. Your first time, Scott. Thank you for waking up with us.
Nice to be here.
There's so much in what we just said, but at the heart of it, Michael, is that the GOP still doesn't have their act together when it comes to passing bills. You wrote about this week. Senate Republicans seem to think, you say, it's on Trump to find the votes for the fund if he wants the money. They were the ones who created this, a senior Senate GOP aide told MS Now on Wednesday. It is very clearly a problem with our members, and our members believe it is theirs to fix. That feels like as accurate as it can get. Donald Trump is the one that created it, and he creates a lot of problems for them. So, sir, you go find the votes.
Remember, this was supposed to be the easy immigration and border patrol package, right? They took it out of government funding. They said we're going to pass this $72 billion through reconciliation, call it a day, and move on. And then just a few days before they were supposed to finish this up and send it to President Trump's desk, that's when the president came out with this anti-weaponization fund, completely throwing a wrench into this entire process, upsetting a lot of Senate Republicans and making them feel like they couldn't move forward without doing something about this. Because remember, we're going to go into what's called a vote-a-rama, which is this unlimited amount of time for debate when Democrats can bring up as many amendments as they want. Chuck Schumer said the very first amendment he'd bring up, again, for the immigration package, would be blocking this fund. And then you have vulnerable Republicans, some of those YOLO caucus Republicans that we now see untethered, that they may feel like they need to support something. It could hamstring the entire package. So because of that, Senate Republican leadership said, OK, we're going to cut this short, go to recess early, but they still haven't figured out a way out of the box.
So the issue of germaneness matters here, too, right? Because it sounds like this anti-weaponization fund is relevant to the Senate Judiciary Committee. So I'm curious, based on your reporting, that only requires like 50 votes. I think it's 50 votes, right?
Procedure.
Well,
it's a little early. 7:04 now.
Because this anonymous quote that this anonymous quote that Eugene just referenced, right? It ended with, and I quote here, that our members still believe it is theirs, the White House is to fix. Personally, I don't think this one is fixable. I'm curious to see what you have to say. I think of this as the red line that Senate Republicans are just not going to cross. And listen, more often than not, they bend, right? But if you think back to the first part of this administration, even before he was sworn in, he really wanted Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. And they drew a red line. They said, hell no. And I think this is one of those hell no moments.
That was their last red line, wasn't it?
Well, no,
I mean, sir, look, it's not your usual suspects who are just upset about this, right? It's a lot. Take it from Ted Cruz himself. He was on his podcast last week. He said Todd Blanche was at a meeting with Senate Republicans. Of about the 45 who were in there, at least 20 were pissed. He said it was one of the most fiery meetings that he's seen.
Right.
You bring up the good point about germaneness, and I spoke to another Senate GOP aide who said that because a Judiciary Committee is involved in this, anything related to the weaponization fund would likely be germane, meaning it would only need 50 votes to get over the finish line, meaning that if you have a couple Republican defectors joining all 47 Democrats, you can actually block this thing. And that is the crux crux of the problem here because, again, I was talking to one of these aides and they said we can come up with some sort of amendment that's a compromise amendment among Republicans. Maybe it doesn't block the fund altogether, but it says January 6 rioters can't get money from it. It says Congress will have a little bit more say in who's on the commission overseeing this fund. That's all fine and dandy, but then what is going to stop some of these YOLO Republicans, some of these more moderate Republicans from going and supporting a stronger Democratic amendment that says you need to block this thing? If enough of them do it, that could be the entire ballgame. That is this sort of balancing act right now the Republicans are dealing with, that they can do something that their conference agrees with, but what's stopping those few Republicans from supporting a Democratic amendment as well?
Right. I'm here for the YOLOs. Speaking of the crux of the problem, Scott, I mean, we wouldn't be talking about any of this were it not for the president suing the IRS for $10 billion over the IRS audit. The New York Times has reporting that came out yesterday, an inside look into how we got here. And they report behind the scenes, the job of addressing the vexing problem of how to settle the suit fell to a tight-knit group of lawyers, all of whom had allegiance to Mr. Trump. The discussions were so closely held that some senior White House officials told others that they were blindsided, learning of them only once their agreement was nearly complete. And we should also note that among the lawyers in the tight-knit group, Boris Epshteyn was one of them, officials in the department run by Todd Blanche. And remember, Boris Epshteyn was a client of Todd Blanche's when he was in the private sector, and Todd Blanche was also the private attorney of Donald Trump when he was in the private sector briefly. So, Scott, you covered DOJ for a long time. Please explain to the viewers just how unusual it is to have the President of the United States sue an agency that technically he controls.
Not only is it unusual, it's unprecedented. And this is a big problem for the administration. This slush fund's about to collapse. I'll tell you right now, it's got political problems, which Michael masterfully described. It has legal problems, too. There's a judge in Florida who has questions about what you just described and the other components of this slush fund. And she has ordered the case reopened, and she wants to hear what went on here. She wants to hear what's behind this case. Why was there a suit with no adversarial party? Why was somebody suing himself? And what became of this fund? How did this fund grow out of the lawsuit? She has questions. She will demand answers. The Department of Justice or the Trump administration will have to answer questions. I see all kinds of pitfalls legally.
Wait, Scott, one more thing on this. The other part of this deal, it's not that's outrageous, not just the slush fund, but the Trump, his businesses, his family have been, what's the word I'm looking for? No longer under investigation by the IRS.
Oh, yeah. You can never do it again. Is part of this settlement.
Never. I mean, can I get that deal?
Well, let's put aside the fact.
If I were ever to, just.
I want that deal too. Let's put aside the fact that we're in the middle of a cost crisis and taxpayers see themselves on the hook to pay out people they don't even know, people who may have beaten cops. There's also the issue.
Not may have beaten cops. They beat cops. We all saw it.
They may qualify. The money being sent to people who are convicted crooks doesn't land right with taxpayers. What's more, people getting special perks from the IRS or absolved of future IRS audits.
That's the word I was looking for.
That doesn't land well with taxpayers right now. It's a terrible time. The optics are awful. That's why this thing is as unpopular as, like, chicken pox.
Yeah.
Nobody likes this. It's not just the YOLO caucus. You can't find a senator who likes this thing.
So, Michael,
that's a problem.
Is this the moment, then, where Republicans are finally going to find a still spy? And we could talk about this YOLO caucus as people like you have Cassidy, thank you very much. You have Cornyn also, and then there was already Mr. Tom Tillis, who was already a part of that. So that's three. You can add in probably Lisa Murkowski in that, maybe Susan Collins, depending on what it is. Rand Paul, who has never really been a big fan of Donald Trump.
What about Joni Ernst?
Yeah, no, she's very
retiring.
Trumpy. Very Trumpy.
Okay.
I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it. But so that's more than enough to stop most things. Do you see them actually doing it? Because the benefits may outweigh, may not outweigh the problems for them that end up coming from Donald Trump.
I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't at this point. Look at someone like Tillis, Cornyn, and Cassidy. I mean, they literally have nothing to worry about. They are completely untethered from Trump, not to mention they've been burned by Trump. I mean, John Cornyn tried for months to get that endorsement. He thought he may have gotten it, and he didn't. So they're untethered from the situation. The only thing I will say is that by Senate Republicans saying the ball is in the White House's court, they are waiting essentially for the White House to say we're not going forward with this. Or
what does it say that they're not? What does it say that the White House Legislative Office is not trying to lead on this when they know this is what Donald Trump
they're
wants?
making a really big issue for their members. I was talking to a member of the House last week, a vulnerable member who called me up and said, we're really nervous about this. Like, what is going to happen with this fund? We can't support this. This is not going to play well in our districts, not to mention the fact that we're, almost 5 months away from the midterms?
Michael and Scott, hold on. We're going to keep this conversation going about the YOLOs and whether they'll find their spine. The conversation will continue on the other side of the break. You're watching The Weekend on MS Now. This is and Scott MacFarlane. I abruptly cut everybody off before the last break, but Anthony, you wanted to jump in with some thoughts about YOLO?
Yeah, well, specifically about this $1.8 billion slush fund. I think the problem that we're seeing in Congress and the courts is not just that they did it, but it's how they announced it. Right? It looks like they gamed the system, right? I was at the Todd Blanche congressional hearing on, I believe it was, Tuesday, Monday, before the caucus, and then the next day or the same day, but hours later, it comes out. And then, so, I mean, what's your take on that? That's what I think. But you guys are on the ground, on the Hill, doing the hardcore reporting. They're pissed because they tried to game the system.
Let me unfurl some reporting. In the next 24 hours, by tomorrow morning, there will be Senate proposals to gut this thing that are announced. They're coming back to town. They want to be heard on this. Senate Democrats want to kill this thing immediately as the week begins, while they seem to have public outrage on their side. So we will find these things out tomorrow as they're flying back to D.C. They want to jam up Republicans indefinitely because they know it's unpopular, not just in its composition, not just in how it enriches people who beat cops, but what you just said, the backdoor way they tried to sneak this thing through. I mean, this was not done on the up and up, and it wasn't done transparently, and that further pisses people off.
Mm-hmm. So I just wonder, I know we've talked about this already, but given what Scott said, and Democrats putting out amendments possibly tomorrow or try to gut this thing, will Republicans do publicly what they're saying behind the scenes to the likes of the Wall Street Journal, saying, we don't like this, trying to urge the White House to get rid of the fund?
I think we're likely going to. And the only reason why I say that, and, it comes with a caveat that we don't usually see Republicans willing to go against the president. But this is something that they are so pissed off about, right? This is something that they really think is a problem back home. They don't believe in it personally. And if it just festers and it continues, they're going to get to a situation where voting begins, Democrats introduce an amendment, and they're going to be put on the record about it anyway. So I think that they, in a sense, Senate Republicans would rather do the backdoor dealing with the White House and even some public pressure beforehand than when they're put into a corner and have to vote on an amendment.
I want to move over to the House a little bit because they have their own issues, right? They have the thinnest of margins. The conference over there, when it comes to Republicans, is historically unruly, especially for Mike Johnson. Mm-hmm. They have to deal with this Iran war powers resolution when they get back. How do you see him navigating that?
And let's add to the mix, they have attendance problems. Mm-hmm. They have a narrow majority, and as Michael
they're not coming to work.
Not everybody's showing up. Mm-hmm. So that margin sometimes actually is zero or invisible. The war powers vote was about to collapse on them. They were about to lose it. And I think they want to figure out how to absorb that shock before they put the vote to the floor. By the way, Republicans are leading, or at least are part of the team putting up an anti-slush fund bill. Right. They now have 9 co-sponsors as of this morning, and that number is going to grow tomorrow, too. I think they're going to have to figure out a way to accept losing a war powers vote, or they're going to have to avoid having it at all.
What does Donald Trump do to Mike Johnson if that happens?
I don't think Mike Johnson can worry about next week or next month. Right. I think he's worrying about getting through the day.
Yeah.
I think that was the Kevin McCarthy.
Maybe the hour or two.
Yeah. Survive the day.
So you guys both mentioned attendance issues. I want to drill down on one particular absence. Congressman Tom Kaine Jr. from New Jersey hasn't cast a vote in what, 2 months?
Swing district, too.
Swing district. What's going on there?
He says he has an illness. His office has said he has an illness, an undisclosed illness, and that he'll be back to work soon. There was a local New Jersey reporter who got him on the phone and said he'll explain everything once he's back, not disclosing, again, what the illness is, where he is, what's going on. I mean, it's such an uncommon thing. It's so unprecedented thing that we're watching. And by the way, this is a member of Congress who is elected and gets paid to represent the people. If he's not in Washington taking votes, representing his constituents, it's a very bizarre situation.
In the Senate, we've had a little bit of history with this. Robert Byrd of West Virginia, Thad Cochran of Mississippi kind of went missing for stretches of time. They were senior members of the Senate, but they were not in frontline purple states.
Right. Scott, since you're here at the table and a former CBS News employee, I would love to get your thoughts on this headline from the AP from Thursday on CBS replacing the 60 Minutes executive producer, calling for a new approach. CBS News leader Barry Weiss replaces executive producer, naming outsider Nick Bilton, a longtime technology journalist and documentarian, as the show's new leader. What does that signal to you about the direction that CBS is going in?
Point of personal privilege, I worked with Cecilia Vega, who has been fired. I adored working with her. She was a North Star for so many of us in how she did her job. This is provocative. I mean, you're making big changes to something that is wildly successful. That means you better do it right. These changes they're making are incredibly high stakes. It is not just a lion of broadcast history, 60 Minutes, but it's a really high-functioning, highly successful, highly lucrative operation. They better get this right, whatever they're doing.
And it also just shows that it's possibly more about putting your stamp on CBS for Barry Weiss than it is on actually figuring out how to make it a profitable news organization, right? Because at the end of the day, 60 Minutes was not the problem. 60 Minutes is doing all the things just like you said. A lot of people are still watching 60 Minutes. And some of the other shows that she should probably be focusing on instead.
Here's the good news for them is this show still goes on after NFL football on Sunday in September when it comes back. There will be an audience that samples it. Guarantee you that. A huge audience will sample it. They better get it right.
I just better hope that 60 Minutes doesn't go the way of the CBS Evening News, because, that's a roller coaster when it comes to the ratings. Michael Schnell, Scott MacFarlane, thank you both very much for coming to the weekend. Still ahead, while most of his predecessors have looked to eliminate actual or the appearance of conflicts of interest related to the presidency, Donald Trump has no such compunction. We'll discuss it next with Norm Eisen, who served as President Obama's special counsel for ethics. You're watching The Weekend. In the post-Watergate era, there had been a general pattern by presidents to voluntarily take steps to eliminate both actual conflicts of interest and even the appearance of conflicts. Famously, President Jimmy Carter placed his family's peanut farm into a trust. President Barack Obama avoided refinancing his Chicago family home because of the optics, since he was regulating the banking industry. Instead of following the precedent set by past presidents, Donald Trump has gone completely in the other direction with an ever-growing list of actions benefiting himself, his family, and his allies. Just look at the headlines from just this week, including Dell Computers winning a huge Pentagon contract after Trump had been hyping the company and reportedly purchased between $1 million and $5 million in Dell stock. The Trump organization says that outside brokerage firms made the trades with no involvement from Trump, his family, or the organization. There is ProPublica's reporting that the White House intervened to get a $620 million deal for a company tied to President Trump's adult son, Don Jr. Of course, all the parties involved are denying the story or not talking at all. And there is the New York Times is reporting that the contractor working on the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool renovations, who didn't even have to bid on the project and who Trump said was chosen because the contractor had worked on the swimming pool at one of his golf clubs, that guy got a contract that has an allegedly inflated profit margin. An Interior Department spokeswoman defended the contract's costs to the Times, claiming it was necessary to expedite the completion of the project ahead of the country's 250th anniversary. The thing is, in a normal presidency, any one of these stories would be a massive scandal warranting weeks of coverage and maybe even some congressional hearings. But in this presidency, it's just another day ending in day. Joining us now, Norm Eisen, founder and executive chair of the Democracy Defenders Fund and former special counsel for ethics in the Obama administration. He is the man who told President Obama he could not refinance his home.
So he knows a little bit. Right? He knows a little bit.
So you know a lot about this, Norm. I mean, I was sort of gobsmacked in the latter part of last week when one thing after another came out where the president lost in court, where judges are pushing back. But, I mean, the scandals here, I just wonder, why don't you think Washington is just ablaze in fury over the president literally just, I'm just going to say it, stealing from the American people?
Well, I do think that the past days have marked an inflection point.
Really?
Both with the scandals erupting, the stock trades, that got everybody's attention, where the president is trading in Dell stock.
His team says it's not him doing it, it's someone else for him.
Well, it's on his
on his thing.
It's on his form that goes to that he must file with the federal government, and I do not think we need to take it at face value. I have nothing to do with it. Let's see the proof that he had nothing to do with it. Then you have this deal for Vulcan Elements, the Don Jr. Associated Company, where the White House intervened with the Pentagon. 50 Shades of Blue, the reflecting pools.
That's good.
That is so good. But it's not just the scandals. What we're seeing is the pushback. On Friday at Democracy Defenders Fund and Democracy Defenders Action, we got the two biggest court pushbacks on Donald Trump's conduct, with the Kennedy Center renaming and closing. How much is it worth to put your name on the Kennedy Center? That's like something they do in North Korea. President says, I'm going to put my name everywhere. The court said, no, you can't rename it. You can't close it unless you comply with the law. That was one of the biggest corruption scandals of the administration. And then that was our case, then with wonderful partners. And then on the $1.8 billion fund, the judge in Florida very sternly written order reopening that case and investigating what went on there. Again, that's a big win for us and our partners. So it's not only what Donald Trump is doing, it's the pushback. And like with the Epstein files, this $1.8 billion fund, this Kennedy Center case, has gripped the attention of the country.
One of the things that when you come on here, you always bring a lot of optimism that it's going to work out.
It's because of all the free coffee back there in the green room. It charges me up.
And then after you leave, I'm like, he thinks this thing is going to work out. But you were right. You came on here and said for both of these cases that you guys were going to prevail. They'll probably uphill and they'll keep going. But one of the things that I'm curious about, this is my theory of the American people, is that, and probably people in general, people are probably fine with and they are able to ignore, alleged corruption when things in their life are going fine, right? Y'all were screaming from the rooftops about the Emoluments Clause during the first administration, right? Where he was having foreign entities stay at what was the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C. and at other properties around the country. No one really cared. It didn't break through with the American people, but this seems to be breaking through. And that part of that is because gas, the average of gas is like $4.50 or something, and continues to climb. It doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. They're watching as their healthcare costs continue to get high. They're looking at the ways in which they have to make a decision between food and gas some days. And as you're looking at how the American people are taking all of this in, right? How do you think they're feeling? What are you hearing? Because you talk to people.
Well, the polling, but also the more anecdotal evidence both suggest that Donald Trump is at historic lows in his popularity. And I think you hit on the iron triangle that is trapping him now, Eugene. There is a cost of living crisis in this country, from the gas pump to healthcare costs. It is tied directly to the corruption and to the competence crisis. So take the Iran war. We went to war. Now we're fighting to get back to the status quo. Right. And that is hitting all of us in the pocketbook. I was shocked when I went to the gas pumps. And people will, when I was in the White House, tormenting everybody with making
with
them
rules.
Very annoying.
And laws and the Constitution. When I was there, the political side of the House said, watch gas prices over the summer. That is the single strongest indicator of performance in an upcoming election cycle. So there's a much broader cost of living crisis, but it's driven by the cost of these corruption scandals. That's a tax that every American has to pay. And there's so many, it piles up, it's breaking through. And then the sheer incompetence. And I think that explains it's an important determinant in Donald Trump's low popularity.
So we have about 45 seconds. I want to go back to both of these cases that you guys just won in court on Friday, or won in the next round of questioning. I think we are seeing at the district court judge level, people who are standing up for the rule of law. I do worry about, as these cases go through the federal judiciary and perhaps make their way to the U.S. Supreme Court, that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to be a backstop for perhaps this case and other cases. What's your take just about the state of the judiciary in this context?
I think on certainly plenty to dislike about the Supreme Court's jurisprudence, but on some of the most important rule of law, anti-corruption cases, the Supreme Court does the right thing. National Guard case, remember, we represent cities around the country on that matter. Supreme Court stopped Donald Trump. We were just in court on the birthright citizenship case.
Still waiting for that ruling.
We think we're going to win that case. We have an injunction that has stuck. The Supreme Court didn't touch it. Fed Governor Lisa Cook, that's another one of our cases, this outrageous pattern of criminalizing your opponents, who innocent, did nothing. We think we're going to be successful there. So I think on some of these, I think Kennedy Center on the $1.8 billion fund, those wins will survive higher court review.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Norm Eisen with his optimism, as always. We thank you. And the little notebook. Y'all don't see me. He always has a notebook full of all the wins.
I need to get a bigger notebook with all these wins.
Thank you so much. Exactly. Before the break, this programming reminder Tuesday, the battle for control of Congress continues as voters head to the polls in 6 pivotal states, including California. Join Rachel Maddow and team for analysis throughout the night. I'll be there with Ali Velshi breaking down real-time results. Special coverage begins Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern on MS Now. But up next, deal or no deal? It's unclear when or even if a potential deal with Iran will be announced as Trump keeps rolling out the same talking points over and over. I have my boy over here, Jonathan, is rolling his eyes already. Former Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes joins us next. You're watching The Weekend.
In an interview that aired last night on Fox, the president said the United States will pursue a deal or resume military action and outlined his red lines on any agreement.
Number one, the strait has to be opened immediately and has to be free, no tolls, et cetera, et cetera. And number two is they can't have a nuclear weapon. That's all there is. It's very simple. And then we're going to get out of there.
He seems to still be considering a potential agreement with Iran after teasing that he would make a, quote, final determination on Friday. And while we wait to see if any actual deal will be announced, the U.S. Central Command said the U.S. military stopped a merchant vessel trying to break its blockade of Iranian ports on Saturday. And then there's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who said the U.S. is ready to restart strikes on Iran if no deal is reached. We are joined now by Ben Rhodes, the former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama, MS Now political and national security analyst, and the author of a brand new book, All We Say, The Battle for American Identity, a history in 15 speeches. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, Ben, I'm just going to go first because just so we get this out of the way. For months now, we have been hearing a deal is imminent. The terms have been put out there. The terms might be agreed to, and then the terms are unacceptable, and then there's no deal. What do you make of this entire situation? And are you like me in that you don't believe anything that this administration says when it comes to deal or no deal with Iran?
I don't think there's a lot of reasons to believe anything they say until there's actually a deal. I think what's so absurd about it is the terms of the deal are very clear. In other words, there's no mystery in terms of what the elements would be if there actually is an agreement, which is that Iran opens up the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before the war. The U.S. lifts the blockade. Iran is going to have to get some revenue, I think. I think they're insisting on some sanctions relief or some revenue from tolling the Strait of Hormuz on the front end, and then you have a period of time, and then you negotiate a nuclear deal. I think what is causing so much confusion about this is, first of all, President Trump cannot keep his mouth shut. And so when you're in negotiations and Trump goes out and he starts boasting about a deal or boasting about concessions that the Iranians haven't made, and they have hardliners in their system who are running that country now, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is running that country now, well, then the IRGC calls in the negotiators and says, what's this all about? Why is Trump saying this? And it blows things up. I think that's part of what's happened. That and just probably disagreement about sequencing in terms of the Iranians are going to want concessions up front from the United States in terms of lifting the blockade or getting revenue, because twice before, while they've been in negotiations with the United States, they've been bombed by the United States. So they're not going to do things without getting something in return first.
Yeah, Ben, maybe you just don't understand the president. He's playing 4D chess. Republicans always like to tell me that he's out here. We just don't get it. It's not just President Trump not, as you put it, being quiet when it comes to these negotiations. We also have Pete Hegseth, who was in Singapore just yesterday. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Right now, we're focused on being postured and prepared to re-engage if we have to. I mean, this is a high-stakes negotiation. We've got the best negotiator in the world leading it. Iran may not want to give up their nuclear ambitions, but we believe at the table they can and will over time, given the right set of incentives. But the most powerful incentive is the capabilities we have there right now, which they can't ultimately defend against at any real level. And those are decisions in the future the president will make based on how this ends. But I feel confident that he'll get to a deal that serves the interests of the American people.
Prepared to re-engage if we have to. He was talking to military folks also over the last couple of days and said even something similar, a little bit more aggressive. Saber rattling is not anything new. It's not something the United States typically operates in publicly. How hard is it for the negotiators? How hard is it for the folks who actually have to get this done when you have them continually doing this, bringing up things, not just in public, but like the way that they're doing it, making these threats and pulling everything back so quickly?
And I'm sure that this is causing problems. I mean, when we were, first of all, I've been sufficiently triggered. Iran has permanently committed to not pursuing a nuclear weapon before in the Iran nuclear agreement in the Obama years, which Trump pulled out of. So when he talks about he needs to get them to open up the Strait and commit to not building a nuclear weapon, the Strait was open before the war, and they had committed to not building a nuclear weapon under a diplomatic agreement that he pulled out of. Just kind of encapsulates how much he's created this crisis. And then to get to your point about threats, Eugene, like Pete Hegseth seems to think that the Iranians are sitting there thinking that they have no leverage. The Iranians are the ones with the leverage. They're the ones who've closed the Strait of Hormuz. They took all of that military firepower from the United States and Israel, and they're sitting there closing a body of water that they know can paralyze the American and global economy. So the threats don't really accomplish anything. The Iranians are well aware of what the U.S. can do militarily. They've weathered it, and they're at the negotiating table knowing that Trump needs this strait open, or else the entire global economy could collapse by the end of the year.
Ben, before we let you go, I want to transition to Cuba. It looks like the administration really is intensifying pressure there. And I just wonder, from your vantage point, is there a coherent foreign policy doctrine, or are we really just looking at a series of disconnected political tactics and decisions?
I think that we are really just kind of, going from one crisis to the next here of our own creation. I mean, Cuba, there's no national security, at least in Iran, there's a nuclear program that's a U.S. national security interest. There's no threat emanating to the United States from Cuba. I think that the doctrine is, where can we use our own dominance to try to get an outcome that will make Donald Trump look good or feel good, or will bring about some natural resource? And Venezuela was oil and Cuba it's real estate. But it's not anything that's going to serve the interests of the American people or lower prices or do the things that he was elected to do.
Ben Rhodes, author of All We Say, thank you so much. A book, as I started digging into it yesterday, that takes us back to a time where